is a disastrous way of punishing somebody.
It is
and it is
psychotic.
in fact, exactly, it's psychotic, and it's therefore God would be morally culpable for that sort of thing.
Well, they use
We would put him on trial.
Yeah.
If it were.
They use that excuse for, I think it was Pat Robertson or Jerry Falwell, where both of them used the...
Thank God one of them is gone.
Yeah. Who made some mention of the fact that the reason that the tsunami struck New Orleans is because of the red light district and the Storyville and all that stuff. And in fact, the vast majority of the damage was not in those particular areas.
Not only that, but I would like to ask whoever made that brilliant suggestion, how come that Amsterdam never got a tsunami? Because, there's a very famous red district in there.
One of my favorite cities in the whole world, by the way.
I should have thought so.
They're just not logical. I mean, we're trying to talk to people who don't care about logic. It's, and you just have to shrug your shoulders. You just can't believe it. It's like that Geico commercial where the caveman says, "What?"
Yeah.
It's almost like there's, look, what are we talking about? But, some people think that all we need is more science education.
Right.
And science is the answer. And, so what do you think about that as a scientist?
Well, as a scientist,
educator?
of course, I'm expected to say yes. As an educator, we need more science teaching, and then belief in the paranormal and belief in all this nonsense will go away, and we will all be turned into critical thinkers. Unfortunately, it turns out that things are not quite that easy. There is some research that has been done, because one of the nice things about making statements of fact is that then you can investigate them. So if I make a potential statement of fact, like saying, well, more science education will actually lead to less belief in the paranormal, that is a prediction about factual matters. So I can go out as a scientist and try to see if that is in fact the case. Then several people did, including myself. I co-published an article on this topic with one of my undergraduate students. And one of the things that we did was this. We took a bunch of undergraduate students from science and non-science majors. And then we asked them to answer certain questions about their understanding of science and about their belief in a series of paranormal claims. Not just creationism, but in general things like telepathy and ghosts and things of that sort. And the results were actually stunning. First of all, it turned out that, yes, the science majors did know a little bit more science than the non-science majors, but very little. It was barely statistically significant, so that means that we're not doing a particularly good job even in teaching the science facts. But to our surprise, it turned out that the science majors were actually more gullible in terms of paranormal belief than the non-science majors. There was a significantly much higher belief in the paranormal by science majors, and so that was stunning, surprising, and so why did that happen? Again, since this is science, you can actually, and it deals with facts, you can do follow-up studies, and you can keep investigating the situation. So we found out two interesting things. First of all, the non-science majors that we happened to pick, and who turned out to have less belief in the paranormal than the science majors, they turned out to be almost exclusively philosophy majors. Now that's significant because a philosophy major can be construed as one long course in critical thinking. That's what philosophers do. I mean, the typical, the stereotypical and a little exaggerated, but only little, difference between an introductory science course, especially say biology, and an introductory philosophy course is the following: the biology teacher comes into class with 1,000 pages of a book. It looks like the yellow pages, and it says, pretty much memorize everything that's written in here, spit it back exactly as it is at the moment of the final, and you pass. The philosopher comes in, first of all, with a much smaller book, about a couple of 100 pages. And second of all, more importantly, says, okay, find everything as much as possible that is wrong with what the authors of these books say, and you pass. Now, which kind of attitude do you think is going to be more conducive to critical thinking? So part of the thing we did as a follow-up study was, well, is it really, therefore, science knowledge, or is it understanding of science as a process that matters? And so we compared, we asked several undergraduate students what questions about their understanding of science as it was taught in a typical college class, which basically mostly factual. Do you know things like, the structure of DNA, or do you know what comes out of a chemical reaction when you put an acid in the presence of a base, and so on and so forth? That sort of factual questions. And then we asked them, what did they know about conceptual issues in science? Did they know the difference between a hypothesis and a theory? Did they know could they mention some of the elements of the scientific method? Could they tell us if science proves things, and so on and so forth? And it turns out, again, that there was an inverse relation between conceptual understanding of science and belief in the paranormal. And there was no relationship whatsoever between factual knowledge of science and the paranormal. So what the conclusion was from these and other studies is that, unfortunately, if we start teaching more science the way it is taught today, which is largely factual, the situation isn't going to be any different in the future, because that is not teaching critical thinking, that is not teaching understanding of science. What we need to teach is, first of all, critical thinking in general, even outside of science. And moreover, not at the college level only, but all the way back to elementary school. There's no reason whatsoever why critical thinking cannot be introduced at the level of elementary school, other than the people in power don't want us to teach critical thinking in elementary school, because all of a sudden, God forbid, you get a nation of people who actually think for themselves. That's not a good outcome for certain people. So that's what we need to do. It's not just more teaching of science as much as a different kind of teaching of science.
Are those the things that you're talking about? In your introduction, we talk about your interest in new methods of teaching. Is that what you mean?
That's part of it. So one of the courses that I teach at Stony Brook University, for example, is called How Science Works. And it is a course devoted to an understanding of the nature of science. But part of what I mean in the book about teaching in general differently is that it's way too easy to just show up in front of a bunch of undergraduates and give them a lecture. I guarantee you it's not really that difficult. It's, you prepare your material, you have your slides prepared, you just show them one after another, and 50 minutes later the class is over and dismissed. And most people have not gotten anything at all out of that sort of presentation. New teaching methods and more effective teaching methods, however, have been around actually for quite some time, and they've been proven to be effective. It's just that they require a lot more work. And especially they require smaller classrooms.
On whose part? The teacher's part, you mean?
The teacher's part. Because what happens is that, for example, we know that so-called active learning is much more effective than this sort of passive reception of information. Now, active learning sounds easy for the teacher, because all the teacher has to do is to facilitate a discussion, in class. So today we're talking about, for example, this semester, this summer term, I'm teaching an introductory philosophy class at Stony Brook in Manhattan, Stony Brook University, Manhattan. And one of the topics we had the other day was the war on terror. Let's talk about the war on terror. And what does it mean to have a war? What is a just war? What is the distinction between a just war and an unjust war, and so on and so forth? Instead of coming in and giving a lecture and say, here's what a just war is, here's how it applies to the situation of the war on terror, I said, okay, I'm going to give you a minimum background of readings. You do the readings, then we start talking. And the students did most of the talking. What makes this difficult is, first of all, the students don't talk. Because you have to force them, you have to give them incentive, because they're not used to it. They expect to be the passive recipients of knowledge from the wisdom of the professor. They're not expected all of a sudden to be put on in front of the camera, so to speak, and they have to talk. Secondly, it is actually difficult.
Can I just say?
Yes.
Aren't people often afraid or shy to speak up in class because they're afraid to say something that will be considered foolish?
Correct.
How do you get around that?
There are ways to get around that. So one of the things that I do, for example, and I didn't invent this, I just implement things that I read about in the educational literature. But one of the things that seems to be very effective is this. At one point, I will pose a question to the students. Say, for example, let's discuss the definition of just war. What kind of criteria qualify for a war for being a just war? And then I tell them, okay, you have 5 minutes to divide yourselves into groups of 2 or 3 people. These are called buzz groups, and start talking about yourselves. I don't, I'm going to stay back here, and if you need help, ask me. But I'm going to stay back, and you guys discuss for 5 or 10 minutes.